Daniel Carter floated through the corridors of Meridian 7 Research Station with his tablet in hand. The young man had been on this space station for 3 months now, working on his graduate thesis about alien creatures. He was only 22 years old, and this was his first real job in space. Everything still felt new and exciting to him. The station orbited a small moon far from Earth. It was a quiet place where scientists studied strange life forms from other planets. Daniel worked in the basic research wing where they kept the smaller, harmless creatures. His job was simple, but he loved it. Every day he learned something new about life beyond Earth. Tonight the station was quieter than usual. Most people were asleep. Daniel liked working late because nobody bothered him. He could focus on his research without interruptions. He sat at his workstation typing notes about the samples he studied earlier. Suddenly his computer screen flickered. Strange numbers started appearing on the monitor. Daniel frowned and leaned closer. The power reading showed unusual spikes coming from somewhere deep in the station. He had never seen anything like this before. His curiosity got the better of him. Daniel knew he should probably report this to his supervisor, but it was the middle of the night. Maybe he could just take a quick look himself. He saved his work and stood up, stretching his tired muscles. Following the power readings, Daniel walked through empty hallways. The station was huge and had many levels. He passed through areas he recognized, then entered sections he had never visited before. The walls here looked different, more reinforced. Warning signs appeared on the doors. Daniel hesitated. These were restricted areas. Students like him were not supposed to be here. But the power fluctuations were getting stronger according to his tablet. Something strange was definitely happening. He told himself he would just take a quick peek and then report it properly. He found a maintenance corridor that led deeper into the restricted zone. The door should have been locked, but someone had left it open. Daniel slipped inside, his heart beating faster. The corridor was dimly lit and smelled like metal and recycled air. Far below in the deepest part of the station, something was happening. In a heavily secured cell, a massive creature had been waiting for 5 long years. The humans called him Subject 17. They thought he was just an animal, a dangerous predator they captured during a war. But they were wrong. His real name was Kraith. He came from a warrior race called Varathians. They were tall and powerful, covered in dark scales that worked like armor. Kraith stood nearly 3 meters tall when he straightened his back. His eyes glowed faintly in the darkness of his prison. Kraith was not a mindless beast. He was a sentinel, which meant he was a diplomat and protector for his people. 5 years ago he had come to meet humans peacefully, but there had been a terrible mistake. Human soldiers thought his ship was attacking them. They shot at him and captured him. Since then, Kraith had been locked in this cell, studied and hurt by scientists who did not understand what he really was. The head scientist was a woman named Helen Price. She was cold and strict. She did not care that Kraith tried to communicate with them. She ordered painful experiments, taking samples from his body and testing his strength. Kraith endured it all, waiting and planning. Tonight was the night. For months, Kraith had been using his natural abilities to slowly damage the power systems in his cell. Varathians could create small electromagnetic pulses. It was like having electricity in their bodies. Bit by bit, night after night, Kraith had been weakening the energy field that kept him trapped. Then the solar storm hit the moon. The station shook slightly as radiation washed over it. Power flickered throughout Meridian 7. Kraith felt it immediately. This was his chance. He gathered all his strength and released a massive electromagnetic pulse. The explosion was powerful. Kraith's cell door blew apart with a loud boom that echoed through the restricted levels. Alarms started screaming throughout the station. Red emergency lights bathed everything in an eerie glow. Kraith stepped out of his prison for the first time in 5 years. He stretched his cramped muscles and breathed deeply. Freedom felt wonderful, but he was not trying to escape. Not yet. He had a mission to complete first. Kraith needed to reach the communications array and send a message to his people. He moved quickly through the corridors, his footsteps heavy but surprisingly quiet. Kraith knew the layout of this station better than the humans realized. He had been listening and learning for 5 years. He knew where the cameras were, where the guards patrolled, and where he needed to go. Daniel was still exploring the maintenance corridors when the explosion happened. The blast wave threw him against the wall. He fell hard, pain shooting through his shoulder. His tablet clattered to the floor. For a moment, Daniel just lay there, dazed and confused. The alarms hurt his ears. Red lights flashed everywhere. Daniel struggled to his feet, wincing at the pain in his shoulder. What had happened? Some kind of explosion? He needed to get out of here. He tried the door he had come through, but it would not open. The emergency systems had sealed all the restricted area exits. Daniel was trapped. Panic started to rise in his chest. He was not supposed to be here. Nobody knew where he was. Daniel heard something in the corridor ahead. Heavy footsteps getting closer. Something big was moving through the station. His mouth went dry with fear. Whatever had escaped was coming his way. He looked around frantically and saw a damaged storage room. The door hung crooked on broken hinges. Daniel limped inside and hid behind some overturned equipment. He made himself as small as possible and tried not to breathe too loudly. The footsteps came closer. Through a crack in the storage room door, Daniel could see the corridor outside. His eyes went wide with terror as the creature came into view. It was massive, easily twice as tall as Daniel. Dark scales covered its body, gleaming in the emergency lights. Its arms were thick with muscle, ending in clawed hands. The creature's eyes glowed with an intelligent light that was somehow more frightening than mindless rage would have been. This was Subject 17, the most dangerous thing on the entire station. And Daniel was trapped just a few meters away from it. Kraith paused outside the storage room. His nostrils flared as he smelled the air. He tilted his head slightly, listening. The Varathian knew someone was hiding nearby. His sharp senses could detect the rapid heartbeat, the scared breathing, the scent of a young human male. Kraith looked at the damaged storage room door. He could easily tear it open. The human inside would be helpless, but something made him hesitate. This scent was different from the scientists who hurt him. It lacked the harsh chemicals they used. It smelled young, almost like a juvenile. In Varathian culture, harming the young was the greatest dishonor. Even enemy young were protected. Kraith made a low rumbling sound deep in his chest. It was not quite a growl, more like he was thinking. Then he did something that surprised even himself. He turned away from the storage room and continued down the corridor. Daniel remained frozen behind the equipment, unable to believe what just happened. The creature had known he was there. He was certain of it. But it had let him live. Why? In the distance, Daniel could hear shouting and weapons fire. Security teams were responding to the alarm. They were hunting the escaped creature. And Daniel was stuck in the middle of it all. He stayed hidden for several long minutes, trying to calm his racing heart. When he finally worked up the courage to peek out of the storage room, the corridor was empty. The creature was gone, heading deeper into the station. Daniel knew he should call for help. He should tell security where he was. But something stopped him. That creature, that supposedly mindless monster, had spared his life. There had been intelligence in those glowing eyes. Understanding, maybe even mercy. Against all logic and common sense, Daniel made a decision that would change everything. He picked up his damaged tablet and started following the creature's path. He had to know more. He had to understand what was really happening on Meridian 7. The hunt had begun, but Daniel was no longer sure who was the hunter and who was the prey. Daniel followed the massive creature through the damaged sections of Meridian 7. His hands shook as he held his tablet, trying to track where the alien was going. Every instinct told him to run the other way, but his curiosity was stronger than his fear. Something about that creature did not match what he had been told. The station layout on his tablet showed that the creature was heading toward the communications center. Why would a mindless beast go there? Animals did not use computers. This thing was moving with clear purpose, avoiding security patrols and cameras like it understood exactly how the station worked. Kraith reached the communications room and forced the door open with his powerful arms. Inside, he moved to the control panels and began working the keys. His large clawed fingers were surprisingly gentle and precise. He was sending a message, though to where or whom nobody could know. Before Kraith could finish, a security team burst into the room. The leader was Commander Jake Morrison, a tough military man who had fought in several wars. He saw the creature at the controls and immediately raised his weapon. "Open fire!" Morrison shouted. Energy blasts filled the room. The security officers fired everything they had at the creature. Kraith's scales deflected most of the shots, sparks flying off his armored body. A few shots got through, burning into his flesh. Kraith roared in pain and anger, but he did not kill them. This was what amazed Daniel, who watched from a hiding spot nearby. The creature was fast and deadly. He could have torn those men apart easily. Instead, Kraith just knocked them aside, careful not to strike with full force. The officers fell unconscious or injured, but alive. Morrison called for retreat and sealed the communications room door. Kraith was trapped inside, but at least contained. The commander ordered his men to fall back and regroup. Daniel watched the security team leave. Then he looked back at the sealed door. The creature was inside, wounded and alone. Daniel should leave too. This was not his problem. But he could not shake the feeling that something was terribly wrong about this whole situation. Inside the communications room, Kraith examined his burns. They hurt badly, but his body was already starting to heal. Varathians could regenerate from injuries, though it took time and energy. He had failed to send his complete message. Now he was trapped. Then Kraith noticed something. A young human was standing in the corridor outside, visible through the door's window. It was the same scent from earlier, the one he had spared. The juvenile had followed him. Daniel saw the creature looking at him. Those glowing eyes locked onto his face. Terror shot through Daniel's body, but he could not move. He was frozen like a mouse staring at a lion. Kraith moved to the door window. Up close, he was even more terrifying. But then the creature did something Daniel never expected. It raised its clawed hands and began making gestures, slow, deliberate movements with its fingers and palms. Daniel recognized those gestures. It was traitor sign language, a basic communication method used in space when people did not speak the same language. Merchants and travelers used it on frontier worlds. Daniel had learned some of it in his classes, though he was not very good at it. The creature signed slowly, making sure Daniel could see clearly. The message was simple. You, small one. Why follow? Daniel's mouth fell open in shock. This thing could communicate. It was not an animal at all. It was intelligent, maybe as smart as humans or even smarter. His mind raced with questions. With trembling hands, Daniel signed back. His gestures were clumsy and uncertain. Want to understand? Want to help? Kraith tilted his head, studying the young human carefully. Then he signed again. They hurt. 5 years, experiments, pain, you different. You young. Not guilty. Daniel felt sick to his stomach. 5 years of experiments? What had the scientist been doing to this creature? He signed back. I did not know. I'm sorry. What is your name? The question seemed to surprise Kraith. Nobody had asked his name in 5 years. After a moment, he signed, Kraith, Sentinel of Ashcliffs. I came in peace. Before Daniel could respond, the station's speakers crackled to life. Dr. Helen Price's cold voice echoed through the corridors. This is Dr. Price to all personnel. Subject 17 has breached containment and is extremely dangerous. The restricted section will be vented to space in 10 minutes unless the creature surrenders. Any personnel still in the restricted zone should evacuate immediately. Daniel's blood ran cold. Vented to space meant all the air would be sucked out. Everything in the restricted section would be exposed to the vacuum of space. It was a death sentence. For both Kraith and for Daniel, who was still trapped in the sealed zone. Kraith looked at Daniel through the window. The Varathian could potentially survive a short exposure to vacuum. His armored scales and strong body might protect him long enough to escape. But the young human would die quickly. Kraith made a decision. He forced the communications room door open and stepped into the corridor. Daniel backed away in fear, but Kraith signed quickly. Come, stay close. Protect you. Daniel had maybe 3 seconds to make a choice. Trust this alien creature that everyone said was a monster, or try to find his own way out. But the exits were sealed and he did not know the codes. Kraith was his only chance to survive. Daniel nodded and moved closer to Kraith. The Varathian led him quickly through the corridors to an emergency supply station. Inside were environment suits designed for spacewalks. Kraith grabbed one and handed it to Daniel. Put on. Fast, Kraith signed. Daniel struggled into the bulky suit with shaking hands. It was too big for him and awkward to move in. Kraith watched him, and when Daniel fumbled with the helmet seals, the creature gently pushed his hands aside. With surprisingly delicate movements, Kraith checked each seal to make sure they were tight. One leak and Daniel would die. Once Daniel was secure, Kraith led them toward the cargo bay. It was their best chance to find a way out. But more security teams were waiting. They opened fire as soon as Kraith appeared. This time, Kraith positioned himself between the guards and Daniel. Energy blasts hit Kraith's back and sides. He took the hits that would have struck Daniel. The young man watched in amazement as this creature, this supposed monster, used his own body as a shield. When guards tried to circle around them, Kraith moved fast. He grabbed their weapons and crushed them, then pushed the men away without seriously hurting them. His movements were controlled and precise. This was not a raging beast. This was a trained warrior showing incredible restraint. Commander Morrison appeared again with heavier weapons. This time he aimed at Daniel, not at Kraith. "Surrender now, or the human dies," Morrison shouted. What happened next shocked everyone. Kraith did not attack. Instead, he dropped to one knee and placed his clawed hand over his chest. It was a gesture of submission, though Morrison did not understand what it meant. Kraith signed to Daniel. "Translate. Tell them I submit if they spare you. You are innocent." Daniel's voice shook as he spoke through his suit's external speakers. "He is surrendering. He will give up if you let me go." "He says I am innocent." Morrison was suspicious. He thought it was a trick. Dr. Price's voice came over his radio, ordering him to shoot both targets immediately. Morrison raised his weapon, finger on the trigger. Then the venting sequence began. A loud alarm sounded. The air started rushing out of the corridor with a howling scream. Morrison and his team ran for the safety doors. The vacuum was coming. Kraith grabbed Daniel and pulled him close. With powerful legs, the Varathian jumped, carrying Daniel toward an emergency airlock. Debris flew everywhere as the atmosphere explosively decompressed. Kraith wrapped his body around Daniel, protecting the human from the flying metal and equipment. They tumbled into a small maintenance airlock just as the corridor fully vented. Kraith hit the door control and it sealed shut. They were safe, at least for now. Daniel lay on the floor, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might burst. Through his helmet, he could see Kraith's face. The creature was breathing hard, covered in new wounds. But those glowing eyes were focused on Daniel, checking to make sure he was okay. Daniel signed with shaking hands. "Why? Why protect me? I am human. My people did this to you." Kraith was quiet for a moment. Then he signed back slowly. "You are young, learning, not guilty for others' crimes. My people protect the young, even enemy young. This is honor. This is what Sentinel means." Daniel understood then. Everything he had been taught about Subject 17 was wrong. This was not a monster. This was a person with a code of honor stronger than most humans followed. Kraith had been protecting him because it was the right thing to do, not because he expected anything in return. "What do you need?" Daniel signed. "What is your mission?" Kraith explained through signs. He had come as a diplomat 5 years ago, trying to make peaceful contact with humans. But there was a misunderstanding. Soldiers shot at his ship and captured him. For 5 years he endured torture disguised as science, waiting for a chance to send one message to his people. Not a call for rescue, but a warning to stay away from humans. Daniel felt tears in his eyes. His people had done something terrible. They had tortured a peaceful diplomat and treated him like an animal. And now that diplomat was protecting him at great risk. "I will help you," Daniel signed. "I will help you send your message. I will tell everyone the truth." Kraith studied the young human for a long time. Then he nodded slowly. The entire station was on high alert. Security teams patrolled every corridor. Dr. Helen Price sat in the command center, watching screens that showed different parts of Meridian 7. Her face was cold and angry. Subject 17 had escaped and somehow a student was helping it. She would not let this situation continue. "Find them," she ordered Commander Morrison. "Use whatever force is necessary. Both targets are to be eliminated." Morrison felt uncomfortable with the order. He had seen the creature protect the student, had heard Daniel's translation. Something about this whole situation felt wrong. But orders were orders and he was a soldier. He gathered his best teams and began a systematic search. Daniel and Kraith moved carefully through the maintenance corridors. These passages ran throughout the station, used by repair crews to access pipes, wires, and machinery. They were narrow and cramped, especially for someone as large as Kraith, but they offered the best chance to avoid patrols. Daniel used his tablet to access the station systems. What he found made him feel sick. He pulled up Dr. Price's classified files on Subject 17. The experiments described in those files were horrible. They had cut pieces from Kraith's body without pain medicine to see how fast he healed. They shocked him with electricity to test his endurance. They even shot him with different weapons to study his armor. Daniel showed the files to Kraith using his tablet. The Varathian looked at them but showed no emotion. He had lived through all of it. He already knew how cruel it had been. "I am so sorry," Daniel signed. "This is wrong. This is evil." Kraith signed back. "I survived. I stayed strong. Hoped for peaceful end. Now I know humans fear what they do not understand." They developed a plan together. The first communication center was damaged, but there was a backup system in the main control room. If they could reach it, Kraith could send his message home and Daniel could broadcast the truth to everyone on the station. Many people did not know what Dr. Price had been doing. If the crew learned the truth, maybe they would help. The problem was that the main control room was in the most protected part of the station. They would have to go through populated areas where security teams were actively searching. It seemed impossible. Their first challenge came at a security checkpoint called Junction 12. Daniel watched through a maintenance grate as two security officers stood guard. He recognized them. Katie Green and Paul Stevens were nice people who often ate lunch in the same cafeteria as Daniel. They did not look happy about their orders. "I don't like this," Katie said to Paul, shooting at Daniel Carter. "He's a good kid. Something doesn't add up." "Orders are orders," Paul replied, but he did not sound convinced either. Daniel made a decision. He climbed out of the maintenance shaft, hands raised in the air. "Katie, Paul!" "Please don't shoot. I need to talk to you." Both officers spun around, weapons raised. They looked shocked to see Daniel standing there, alive and apparently unharmed. "Daniel, are you okay? Did that thing hurt you?" Katie asked, lowering her weapon slightly. "No, he protected me," Daniel said quickly. "Kraith is not what we think. He is intelligent, peaceful. Dr. Price has been torturing him for 5 years. I have proof. Please just let me show you." Paul kept his weapon up. "That's crazy talk, Daniel. You might be confused. That creature could be controlling you somehow." Before Daniel could argue, Lieutenant Amy Chen arrived with more security troops. She was one of Dr. Price's most loyal officers. "Step away from the maintenance shaft, Carter. You're under arrest for collaborating with a hostile alien." "I am not collaborating. I am trying to prevent a terrible mistake," Daniel pleaded. "Silence," Chen snapped. She raised her weapon, aiming at Daniel's chest. "You have 5 seconds to comply or I will stun you." That was when Kraith emerged from the maintenance shaft. The Varathian moved carefully, slowly, making no threatening gestures. He positioned himself between the guards and Daniel. Then he did something that shocked everyone. Kraith sat down on the floor, making himself vulnerable. He placed his weapon, a piece of metal pipe he had been carrying, on the ground in front of him. The guards stared in disbelief. This supposedly savage creature was surrendering without a fight. "This is a trick," Lieutenant Chen said. "Open fire!" But Katie Green stepped out of formation. "No, ma'am. I will not fire on an unresisting target. That violates our rules of engagement." Paul backed her up. "She's right, look at it. The creature is not attacking. Something is very wrong here." The moment of confusion gave Daniel the chance he needed. He spoke rapidly, explaining everything he had learned. He told them about Kraith being a diplomat, about the 5 years of torture, about how the Varathian had protected him multiple times despite having every reason to hate humans. Lieutenant Chen was not convinced. She prepared to fire anyway. Then Commander Morrison arrived. He had been listening to everything through the security channel. For the past hour, he had been reviewing security footage, watching how Kraith fought, how the creature showed restraint, how he protected Daniel. Morrison raised his hand. "Stand down, Lieutenant. Everyone lower your weapons." "Sir," Dr. Price ordered. Chen began. "I am giving you a direct order," Morrison interrupted. "Lower your weapons now." The security teams reluctantly obeyed. Morrison walked up to Daniel and Kraith. He studied the Varathian carefully. Kraith remained seated, non-threatening, but his glowing eyes met Morrison's gaze steadily. "You have 30 minutes," Morrison told Daniel. "Get to the main control room. Send your message, broadcast your proof. If you cannot prove your claims in 30 minutes, I will hunt you down myself. Understood?" Daniel nodded gratefully. "Thank you, Commander. Thank you for listening." Morrison stepped aside, creating a path. "I am a soldier, but I am not a monster. If what you say is true, if we have been torturing an innocent diplomat, then this needs to be exposed. Go. Time is running out." Kraith stood up slowly. He made a gesture that Morrison did not understand, but it clearly showed respect. Then Kraith and Daniel ran for the control room. Dr. Price was watching everything from the command center. Her face turned red with fury. "Morrison, you fool. You have betrayed this station." She immediately overrode Morrison's authority and activated the automated defense drones. Small flying robots emerged from hidden panels throughout the station. They were armed with energy weapons and programmed to eliminate both Daniel and Kraith. The drones were fast, deadly, and felt no mercy. The first drone appeared as Daniel and Kraith rounded a corner. It fired immediately. Kraith pushed Daniel aside and took the hit. The energy blast burned into his shoulder. More drones appeared, forming a swarm that pursued them through the corridors. Kraith fought them off as best he could, smashing some with his powerful fists, but there were too many. He was already injured from earlier fights. His healing ability was slowing down because he was so tired and hurt. Several times Daniel saw Kraith step directly into the line of fire, taking hits meant for him. They reached a blocked corridor. The path ahead had collapsed during the earlier fighting. The only other route was through the observation deck, a large open room with windows showing the stars outside. It had no cover and would be filled with drones. "I draw attention." "You run," Kraith signed to Daniel. "Complete mission. Tell truth. Tell them Varathians wanted peace." "No." Daniel signed back firmly. "We go together. I am not leaving you." Something that might have been respect showed in Kraith's eyes. He nodded, and together they planned a desperate move. Daniel used his engineering knowledge to overload a nearby power relay. The explosion would be big enough to disable the drones temporarily, but not big enough to hurt them if they moved fast. Daniel set up the overload and they ran. Behind them, the relay exploded with a bright flash. The electromagnetic pulse knocked out all the drones in the area. Daniel and Kraith sprinted across the observation deck toward the control room entrance. They almost made it. At the last second, a command drone appeared. It was bigger and better armed than the others. It locked onto them and fired a sustained beam of energy. Kraith shoved Daniel through the control room doorway and turned to face the drone alone. The beam hit Kraith directly in the chest. He roared in pain but charged forward, grabbing the drone and crushing it with his bare hands. More drones were coming. Kraith fell to one knee, his body smoking from multiple hits. Through the control room window, Daniel watched in horror as his friend was overwhelmed by the attacking machines. Kraith looked toward Daniel through the window. Their eyes met. The Varathian's hands moved slowly, forming signs through the pain. "Send message. Complete mission. Honor requires it." Daniel had tears streaming down his face, but he turned to the console. His hands flew over the controls, bringing the communication system online. He would not let Kraith's sacrifice be for nothing. First, he accessed Kraith's message protocols and transmitted the Varathian's warning to his homeworld. The message went out into space, traveling toward distant stars. Then Daniel started recording his own message. He spoke to every terminal, every screen, every speaker on Meridian 7. His voice shook with emotion as he told the truth about Kraith, about the torture, about the creature who had protected him despite having every reason to hate humanity. He showed the classified files, the experiment records, the proof of Dr. Price's crimes. He showed security footage of Kraith protecting him. The medical team rushed to help Kraith. Dr. Ryan Foster led the group. He was a kind man who worked in the basic research levels, far from the secret experiments. When he saw Kraith's injuries up close, his face went pale. The Varathian's body was covered in burns, cuts, and wounds, both new and old. "How is he still alive?" Foster whispered to his assistant. Daniel stayed close to Kraith, using sign language to explain that these humans wanted to help, not hurt. Kraith was barely conscious, his glowing eyes dim with pain and exhaustion. But when Daniel signed the message, the Varathian nodded slightly. Foster and his team worked carefully. They had limited knowledge of Varathian biology, but they did their best. They cleaned wounds, applied bandages, and set up equipment to monitor Kraith's vital signs. The Varathian's natural healing was remarkable, but his body needed time and rest. While the doctors worked, Commander Morrison dealt with the chaos throughout the station. He had security teams arrest Dr. Helen Price and her closest assistants. Price screamed that he had no authority, that he was making a terrible mistake, but Morrison was unmoved. "You ordered a thermobaric strike on one of our own students," Morrison said coldly. "You conducted illegal experiments without oversight. You tortured what might be a diplomatic representative. I have more than enough authority and you will face justice." Daniel's broadcast had spread to every terminal on Meridian 7. The station's crew was in shock. Over 300 people worked here, and most of them had no idea what Price had been doing in the restricted levels. Many felt sick when they learned the truth. Others were angry that such terrible things happened without their knowledge. Katie Green and Paul Stevens came to the medical bay to check on Daniel. They found him sitting beside Kraith's bed, refusing to leave his friend's side. "You did a brave thing," Katie told him. "A lot of people are talking about what happened. Most of them support you. Some don't, though," Paul added honestly. "Some think you're a traitor for helping an alien. But they're wrong. What you did took real courage." Daniel barely heard them. He was watching Kraith breathe, making sure his friend was still alive. The Varathian looked vulnerable lying there, so different from the powerful warrior who had fought off drones and protected Daniel. Over the next 2 days, the station slowly returned to a kind of normal. Commander Morrison opened all the classified files on Subject 17 to a review committee. What they found was damning. Dr. Price had documented 5 years of torture disguised as research. The files showed that Kraith had tried to communicate many times, but Price dismissed all attempts as animal behavior. The committee also found records of Kraith's original capture. They reviewed the military reports from 5 years ago. The truth became clear. A Varathian ship had approached a human outpost broadcasting signals. The humans thought the signals were weapons locks and fired first. Kraith's ship was damaged, but instead of fighting back or escaping, he had destroyed his own ship and surrendered. It was an act of honor, Morrison explained to the committee. He was trying to prevent war. He sacrificed his freedom to show peaceful intent, and we repaid him with 5 years of torture. The committee members sat in silence, ashamed of what their species had done. Meanwhile, something unexpected was happening. Kraith's message had reached the Varathian homeworld faster than anyone anticipated. A Varathian ship had been searching nearby space for their lost sentinel. They received Kraith's transmission and immediately changed course toward Meridian 7. When Morrison received their communication request, his hands shook. This could mean war. The Varathians might come seeking revenge for what happened to Kraith. The station had no military weapons. They were scientists and researchers, not soldiers. The Varathian ship's commander identified herself as High Sentinel Vrana. Her message was formal but not hostile. She requested permission to dock and retrieve Kraith. She wanted to verify the truth of his message personally. Morrison called an emergency meeting with his senior staff. Some wanted to refuse, fearing an attack. Others argued that they had no choice. They had done wrong, and now they had to face the consequences. Morrison made the decision. "They're coming whether we permit it or not. Better to meet them honestly than to look like we're hiding something else. I'll grant permission to dock." He asked Daniel to be present when the Varathians arrived. Daniel was terrified but agreed. Kraith was still recovering and could not speak for himself. Someone needed to explain what happened. The Varathian ship docked 2 days later. It was huge and beautiful, designed with curves and patterns that looked almost natural. When the airlock opened, High Sentinel Vrana stepped through with her escort of sentinel guards. She was even larger than Kraith, her scales darker and marked with what looked like old battle scars. Her eyes swept over the humans gathered in the docking bay, and everyone felt the weight of her judgment. Daniel stepped forward, his legs shaking. He used sign language, the same method he had learned from Kraith. "High Sentinel Vrana, I am Daniel Carter. I am the one who helped Kraith send his message." Vrana's eyes focused on him. She signed back, her movements sharp and precise. "You are the student, the one Kraith named Defender of Truth." Daniel was confused. He had never seen the content of Kraith's message. Vrana explained through signs that Kraith had formally given Daniel a title of honor in Varathian culture. He had named this young human as someone who upheld justice at great personal risk. "I only did what was right." Daniel signed back. "That is why the title fits you." Vrana responded. She demanded to see Kraith immediately. Morrison led them to the medical bay. Dr. Foster and his team stepped aside nervously as the massive Varathians entered. Kraith was awake, but still weak. When he saw Vrana, he tried to sit up and salute properly. Vrana stopped him with a gentle gesture that was surprisingly tender. The two Varathians spoke in their own language, a deep rumbling sound that the station's computers struggled to translate. Then Kraith gestured to Daniel. The young man came closer, and Kraith began signing in the language they both understood. This human, small and young by our measures, but strong in honor. He risked everything for truth. For me, an enemy to his people, I name him kin. My clan will protect him as they protect me. Vrana turned to Daniel with an intense stare. She signed, Kraith has claimed you as oathkin. This means you are honorary family to his clan. This is unprecedented for someone not Varathian. Do you accept this bond? Daniel did not understand all the implications, but he knew what his heart told him. He signed back clearly, I accept. I am honored. What happened next was something that no human had ever witnessed. Vrana placed her large clawed hand on Daniel's shoulder. She spoke in heavily accented English so all the humans present could hear. By the old laws and the honor of the Ash Cliffs, I witnessed this bond. Daniel Carter, you are now oathkin to Sentinel Kraith. His clan is your clan. His enemies are your enemies. His honor is your honor. We will remember what you did, Kraith added through careful signing. You followed into darkness. You stood when others ran. You spoke truth when silence was safer. You are not Varathian in body, but in spirit you are one of us. Several humans in the room had tears in their eyes. This was more than just forgiveness. This was acceptance at the deepest level. An alien species that had every reason to hate humanity was honoring one human who had shown them kindness. But Vrana was not finished. She turned to Commander Morrison with a more serious expression. We know what was done to Kraith. 5 years of torture, 5 years of dishonor. Your people must answer for this crime. Morrison stood tall. I agree completely. Dr. Price and those who helped her are under arrest. They will face full prosecution under our laws. We cannot undo what was done, but we will ensure justice is served. Justice is not enough, Vrana said firmly. We want the one who suffered to decide the punishment. Everyone looked at Kraith. The wounded Varathian was quiet for a long moment. Then he signed slowly so everyone could see. I want no revenge. I want only truth. Let the humans judge their own by their own laws. Let them show their people can be just. This will mean more than any punishment I could demand. Vrana studied Kraith carefully. You show mercy to those who showed you none. This is very sentinel of you. Very well. We will allow human justice to proceed. But we will watch. If justice fails, we will return. The threat was clear but fair. Morrison nodded his acceptance. Vrana then made another announcement. Kraith came to your people in peace 5 years ago. His message was misunderstood. War almost began because of this failure. Now, because of one young human's courage, war has been prevented. The Varathian Council wishes to establish proper diplomatic relations with humanity. We request that Daniel Carter come to our homeworld as an honored guest. He will tell our council what happened here, so my people can understand humans better. Everyone looked at Daniel. The young man felt overwhelmed. Going to an alien homeworld, meeting an entire council of High Sentinels, it seemed impossible. But Kraith signed to him. You would not be alone. I will be with you. We are oathkin now. Family. Daniel looked at the massive Varathian who had protected him, taught him, and now claimed him as family. How could he refuse? This was bigger than his thesis, bigger than his fears. This was a chance to build a real bridge between two species. The Varathian ship, called the Flame of Honor, was unlike anything Daniel had ever seen. Human ships were built for function, all straight lines and metal corridors. The Varathian vessel had curves and flowing designs that looked almost alive. The walls had patterns carved into them telling stories and pictures. Daniel felt very small as he walked through the ship with Kraith. The Varathians around them were all massive, powerful beings. Some stared at him with curiosity. Others kept their distance, unsure what to make of this tiny human. High Sentinel Vrana gave Daniel quarters near Kraith's room. The space was too large for him, clearly designed for someone much bigger. But it had a window showing the stars, and Daniel spent hours watching space fly by as they traveled faster than light, toward the Varathian homeworld. Kraith became Daniel's teacher during the journey. Each day they spent time together while Kraith recovered from his injuries. The Varathian taught Daniel more sign language and began teaching him spoken Varathian. The language was deep and rumbling, hard for human vocal cords to make properly. But Daniel tried his best. Why do you call yourselves Sentinels? Daniel asked one day through signs. Kraith explained that Sentinels were the most honored members of Varathian society. They were warriors, yes, but also protectors, diplomats, and teachers. A Sentinel's duty was to uphold honor, protect the weak, and seek understanding with others. It was not just a job, but a way of life. You are Sentinel in spirit, Kraith signed to Daniel. You protected truth when it was dangerous. You stood for honor when it cost you. These are Sentinel qualities. Daniel learned that Varathians valued 3 things above all others: Honor meant doing what was right even when it was hard. Strength meant not just physical power but strength of character. Protection of the young meant that children, even enemy children, were sacred and must be kept safe. That is why you protected me on the station, Daniel realized. You saw me as young and innocent. Yes, Kraith confirmed. To harm you would have brought great shame. To protect you brought honor. The choice was simple. But not all the Varathians on the ship felt the same way. One evening, a young Varathian named Thriss confronted Daniel in the common area. Thriss was smaller than most Varathians, but still twice Daniel's size. His scales were marked with fresh battle scars. You are the human that Kraith claims as kin, Thriss signed aggressively. I do not see why. You are weak, soft. You ran and hid while Kraith fought. What honor is there in that? Daniel felt his face grow hot, but before he could respond, Kraith appeared. The older sentinel moved between Daniel and Thriss with surprising speed for someone still recovering. You speak from grief and anger, Kraith signed firmly. This human stood between me and death when he could have run. He spoke truth when silence would have been safer. He chose honor over safety. I have fought beside warriors who showed less courage than this small human. Thriss looked away, but his posture remained stiff. My brother died fighting human ships. How can you accept one of them as family? Your brother died in war, Kraith signed gently. War is when we fail to understand each other. Daniel is proof that understanding is possible. He is proof that humans can learn, can be honorable. Would you dishonor your brother's death by refusing to see this chance for peace? The words hit hard. Thriss stood silent for a long moment. Then he signed briefly to Daniel. Kraith is wise. If he sees worth in you, it must exist. I spoke from pain. I apologize. Later, Thriss approached Daniel privately. The young Varathian seemed embarrassed. My brother was named Kryn. He was a good warrior, a good sentinel. I miss him. When I see humans, I see enemies. But you are not an enemy. Kraith would not claim an enemy as kin. I will try to see what he sees. I am sorry about your brother, Daniel signed. War takes good people from both sides. That is why peace is so important. Thriss nodded slowly and walked away. It was a small moment, but it meant everything. Daniel understood that building bridges between species would happen one person at a time, one conversation at a time. On the 6th day of travel, they arrived at the Varathian homeworld. Daniel pressed his face against the window, watching as the planet came into view. It was beautiful and wild. Huge mountains pierced through clouds. Vast forests covered much of the land. The cities were built into cliffs and mountainsides, working with the natural landscape instead of replacing it. Cravor Prime. Kraith signed beside him. Our home, my home? Now in a way your home too. The ship landed at the Gathering Spire, a massive structure carved from an entire mountain peak. As the airlock opened, Daniel felt his stomach twist with nervousness. He was about to meet the Varathian Council, the leaders of an entire species. What if he said something wrong? What if he failed? Kraith seemed to sense his fear. The large Varathian placed a gentle hand on Daniel's shoulder. You have already done the hard part. You stood for truth when it mattered. Now you just share that truth. Be honest, be yourself. That is enough. High Sentinel Vrana led them through the spire. The corridors were huge and carved with ancient stories. Other Varathians stopped to stare at Daniel, the first human most of them had ever seen. Some looked curious. Some looked hostile. Daniel kept his head up and tried to look braver than he felt. They entered the council chamber and Daniel's breath caught in his throat. The room was enormous, with a ceiling that seemed to reach forever. 12 high sentinels sat in a semicircle, each one representing a major clan. In the center sat the oldest Varathian Daniel had ever seen. His scales were faded and scarred, but his eyes were sharp and aware. Elder Cormac. Kraith signed respectfully. Leader of the council. Eldest of our people. Kraith formally presented Daniel to the council. He told them everything that happened on Meridian 7. His words were powerful, especially when he described how Daniel chose to help him despite having no reason to do so. Then it was Daniel's turn. He stood in the center of the massive chamber, feeling impossibly small. 12 pairs of glowing eyes watched him. The weight of their attention was almost crushing. But Daniel remembered Kraith's words. Be honest, be yourself. He took a deep breath and began to speak. He told his story from the beginning. How he was just a student trying to learn. How he discovered the power fluctuations. How he followed them into the restricted area. He described meeting Kraith for the first time, the terror and then the confusion when the creature spared him. He explained how they learned to communicate, how Kraith protected him again and again. He showed them the classified files he had saved, the proof of Dr. Price's torture. Daniel did not hide the terrible things humans had done. He showed the council exactly how cruel and ignorant his people could be. But he also showed them the good. He played recordings of Katie and Paul refusing to fire on an unresisting target. He showed Commander Morrison stopping the execution. He shared the testimonials from dozens of humans who were horrified when they learned the truth. Elder Cormac, Daniel said clearly, I cannot promise that all humans are good, just like I am sure not all Vorathians are perfect. What I can promise is that many humans, when they know the truth, demand justice. We have laws against what was done to Kraith. We have people who chose to do right when faced with wrong. We can make mistakes, but we can also learn and grow. The chamber was silent when Daniel finished. The council members spoke among themselves in their rumbling language. Daniel could not understand most of it, but he caught enough to know they were debating intensely. Finally, Elder Cormac spoke in heavily accented English. Human Daniel Carter, you have shown courage. You have shown honor. These things we respect. But you are one individual. How do we know your people will not hurt more of our sentinels? How do we trust a species that could do such evil? Daniel thought carefully before answering. You trust by testing. Give us a chance to prove ourselves. Send proper diplomats to human space. Establish real communication so there are no more misunderstandings. Watch how we treat Dr. Price and her helpers. If we fail to punish those who did wrong, then you know we cannot be trusted. But if we do justice properly, if we honor our own laws, then you know we are capable of being good neighbors. Kraith added his own voice, signing so the council could see. I have seen the worst of humanity and the best. The worst acted in darkness, hiding their crimes. The best acted in light, exposing wrong. This tells me humanity's better nature can win. I asked the council to give them one chance, as Daniel gave me one chance. Elder Cormac nodded slowly. The Ash Cliffs have spoken. Their word carries weight. He turned to the other high sentinels. What says the council? One by one, the sentinels gave their judgment. Some remained doubtful. Some were clearly angry about what happened to Kraith, but all agreed that Kraith's testimony and Daniel's courage had earned humanity one opportunity. We will not seek war, Elder Cormac declared. We will not seek revenge, but we demand justice. Those who hurt Kraith must be punished by your laws. If human justice fails, we will consider it a betrayal. Do you understand, human Daniel? I understand, Elder, Daniel said firmly, and I promise to do everything I can to ensure justice is done. Elder Cormac's ancient eyes studied Daniel for a long time. Then he spoke words that Daniel would never forget. You came to our world expecting nothing. You risked much to save one of our own. The council recognizes. 3 months after Daniel arrived on Cravor Prime, a human diplomatic ship entered orbit around the planet. The news spread quickly through the Ashcliff settlement. Vorathians gathered to watch the ship approach, many of them nervous or curious. This was the first official contact between their peoples. Daniel stood with Kraith at the landing area, watching the human ship descend. His heart pounded with mixed emotions. He had been away from other humans for months. Part of him was excited to see his own kind again. Another part of him was nervous about what this meeting would mean. The ship landed smoothly. When the airlock opened, a woman in formal diplomatic clothing stepped out. She was in her 50s with gray-streaked hair and a confident stance. Behind her came a security team and several other diplomats. Ambassador Linda Martinez, Kraith signed to Daniel. The message said she leads Earth's diplomatic corps. Ambassador Martinez walked forward with her hands open and visible, a sign of peaceful intent. She stopped a respectful distance from the gathered Vorathians and spoke clearly. High Sentinel Vrana, Elder Cormac, honored Vorathians. I come representing the Earth government and the Colonial Council. I bring formal apologies for the terrible wrongs done to Sentinel Kraith. I bring assurances that justice is being served, and I bring hope that our peoples can build a peaceful future together. Vrana stepped forward to meet her. The High Sentinel towered over the human woman, but Martinez did not flinch. She looked up and met Vrana's eyes steadily. Your people hurt one of ours, Vrana said in careful English, for 5 years. Why should we trust you now? Because we are proving our words with actions, Martinez replied. She held up a data tablet. Dr. Helen Price and her 3 closest collaborators are currently on trial. The proceedings are public and being broadcast across human space. The charges include torture, illegal experimentation, attempted murder, and violation of diplomatic protocols. The evidence is overwhelming. They will be convicted and imprisoned for many years. She handed the tablet to Vrana, who examined it carefully. The screen showed a courtroom where Dr. Price sat in restraints, facing a panel of judges. Varathian observers were present watching to ensure fairness. We are also implementing new protocols, Martinez continued. Any captured alien must be treated as potentially intelligent and given chances to communicate. Research oversight has been strengthened, and we are establishing a new diplomatic corps trained in first contact procedures. What happened to Kraith will not happen again. Elder Cormac, who had come to witness this historic meeting, spoke in his deep voice. Words are easy. Humans are good at words. We will judge you by your actions over time. That is fair, Martinez agreed. We ask only for the chance to prove ourselves. The formal ceremony moved to the gathering spire. Daniel watched as Ambassador Martinez and Elder Cormac signed the first official treaty between humans and Varathians. It established rules for peaceful contact, trade agreements, and cultural exchange. It was not perfect, and there was still mistrust on both sides, but it was a beginning. After the ceremony, Martinez asked to speak with Daniel privately. They met in a small chamber with Kraith present. Daniel had insisted his oathkin be there. He trusted Kraith more than anyone. Daniel Carter, Martinez said warmly, you have become quite famous back home. Your story is being taught in schools. People call you the bridge builder. You prevented a war and created a path to peace. Daniel felt his face grow hot with embarrassment. I just did what anyone should do. I saw someone suffering and tried to help. That is exactly why you are perfect for what I am about to offer, Martinez said. She leaned forward. We are creating a new human Varathian diplomatic corps. We need people who understand both cultures. You have lived among the Varathians. You have their trust. You speak their language. Daniel, I want you to join this corps as a senior cultural liaison. The offer was huge. It meant a real career, important work, a chance to continue building bridges between species. But Daniel looked at Kraith before answering. The Varathian signed quietly. The choice is yours, Oathkin. Whatever you choose, you have a home here and a home among your people. You belong to both worlds now. Daniel realized Kraith was right. He did not have to choose between being human and being Oathkin. He could be both. He could live in both worlds and help them understand each other. I accept the position, Daniel told Martinez, but I have conditions. I spend 6 months with humans and 6 months with Varathians each year. I remain Oathkin to the Ash Cliffs, and Kraith serves as my co-liaison. We work together. Martinez looked surprised but pleased. Those terms are more than acceptable. In fact, having a Varathian co-liaison makes the program even stronger. Sentinel Kraith, would you be willing to take this position? Kraith signed his agreement. I came to make peace 5 years ago. I suffered for that mission. But now, because of Daniel, the mission succeeds. I will continue this work. It is what a Sentinel does. And so a new chapter began. Daniel and Kraith became the first joint human Varathian diplomatic team. They traveled between worlds, teaching humans about Varathian culture and teaching Varathians about human society. It was not always easy. There were misunderstandings, arguments, and setbacks. But slowly, gradually, the two species learned to work together. Back on Meridian 7, Dr. Helen Price was convicted of all charges. She was sentenced to 30 years in prison. Her research was destroyed, and new guidelines were put in place to prevent such abuses. The station was renamed the Kraith Memorial Research Center, dedicated to ethical study and peaceful contact with alien species. Commander Morrison became the permanent director of the center. Katie Green and Paul Stevens were promoted for their courage in refusing to follow illegal orders. The crew of Meridian 7 took pride in being the place where human-Varathian friendship began. 1 year after leaving Meridian 7, Daniel returned for a visit. The station looked different now. There were Varathian scientists working alongside humans.
Cultural exchange programs brought young Varathians to learn from human researchers.
The restricted levels had been completely redesigned, with proper protocols and oversight. Daniel walked through the corridors with Kraith beside him. Crew members greeted them warmly. Some asked for autographs or pictures. Daniel still felt awkward with the fame, but Kraith seemed to enjoy it. They visited the old control room where Daniel had broadcast the truth. A memorial plaque hung on the wall now. It read, "Here courage spoke truth to power. Here friendship conquered fear. Here peace began." Dr. Foster approached them with a smile. "Daniel, Kraith, it is good to see you both. We have been following your work. You are doing amazing things. We are trying," Daniel said. "There is still so much work to do. Still so much misunderstanding between our peoples. But that is changing," Foster pointed out. "Last month we had our first joint research team successfully complete a project. Humans and Varathians working together to study a new form of bacteria. It was completely peaceful and productive. That would have been impossible a year ago." Kraith signed, "Small steps lead to great journeys. We plant seeds of friendship. Others will grow them into forests." That evening, Daniel stood in the observation deck where he and Kraith had made their final stand. He looked out at the stars, thinking about how much had changed. A year ago, he was a scared student hiding from a monster. Now he was a diplomat, an oathkin, and a bridge between worlds. Kraith joined him at the window. They stood in comfortable silence for a while, just watching the stars. "Do you ever regret it?" Daniel signed. "Everything you went through? The 5 years of suffering?" Kraith was quiet for a long moment. Then he signed slowly, "I regret the pain. I regret the misunderstanding that caused it. But I do not regret where it led. I found a true friend. I helped bring peace between our peoples. If I had to suffer again to achieve this, I would. That is what it means to be Sentinel. You are the bravest person I know," Daniel signed. "And you are proof that bravery comes in all sizes," Kraith replied. "You had every reason to run, to hide, to save yourself. But you stood. You fought with truth instead of weapons. You changed everything." Daniel smiled. "We changed everything, together." A message came through on Daniel's communication device. It was from Ambassador Martinez. A new species had been discovered, and there were concerns about how to make contact without repeating past mistakes. She wanted Daniel and Kraith to advise on the first contact protocols. "Are you ready for the next adventure?" Daniel asked. Kraith's rumbling laugh echoed through the observation deck. "With you, Oathkin, I am ready for anything." They left the observation deck together, heading back to their ship. More work awaited them. More challenges. More opportunities to build understanding between different species. Behind them, Meridian 7 continued its mission of peaceful research. Human and Varathian scientists worked side by side, learning from each other. The station that had once been a place of suffering had become a symbol of hope. In the years that followed, Daniel and Kraith's partnership became legendary. They successfully mediated first contact with 3 new species. They established the Galactic Cultural Exchange Program. They wrote books about cross-species understanding that were studied across dozens of worlds. But perhaps their greatest achievement was simpler than any of that. They proved that